All right, welcome. I just wanted to announce before I forget that the next 2 Fridays, we won't have class. Next Friday, I'm going to Greece. And then the following Friday, I'm returning from Greece in the evening. So the Monday, all level classes will be going, but the Fridays won't, except there's one Monday when I'm in Greece. So I'll send out an email, but I just wanted to mention that. So find your way into a seated position and try to take some time with it so that you feel as even as you can across the sitting bones, also front to back on the sitting bones. The shins are as symmetrical as they can be. And just taking some time to arrange your shoulders in line with your hips, to feel the breastbone coming forward, and adjusting the skull if you need to, so that you're not misaligning the neck, throwing the head forward. So sometimes it's helpful to think about lengthening from your chin up to the base of the skull. And then without disturbing the alignment, bringing the hands together in front of the heart, closing the eyes, and pointing your gaze down, starting to sense the weight of the body meeting the floor. Sometimes there's a little layer of tension there. We're so used to kind of holding ourselves together. So just letting your weight settle into the floor so that there's no layer of tension between you and the floor, that you somehow continue. And hopefully finding a little bit more release in the hips and the groins when you release the full weight of your legs. And once you can sense the weight of the legs, the spine starts to feel supported. And you might sense with every inhale a little bit more lightness along your spine. And as you sense this upward moving, lengthening spine, try to keep your eyes pointed down. Bringing attention to the belly. And if there's any tension or restriction, try to soften the belly with every inhale. We're also very used to keeping the abdomen contracted. Part of that is cultural and part of that is emotional. So just taking a few intentional breaths, letting the belly move, letting the belly expand, letting the belly soften. And then tuning into the face, the skin of the face. We do carry a lot of tension around our sense organs, most of which live on the face. Just bringing some awareness to any tension you're holding in the eyes, behind the eyes, around the mouth, the tongue, the lips, the jaw. So as we enter into a back bending practice, which can be a bit more vigorous, I wanted to start here, just sensing your body when you kind of offload some of those default tensions. Reminding yourself here to take on an attitude of non-harming with the body. And as you're ready, bowing toward your heart. Releasing your hands, lifting your head. And as the eyes come open, reminding you to keep your attention really turned inward. And welcome. So we're going to start with hero pose. The emphasis on our practice today is to focus on the power of the legs in our back bends, how they can support the deepness of extension in the spine. And there's three components to that. There's flexibility, stability, and alignment. So we're going to start with hero pose, which is really wonderful for flexibility and alignment. And you may know what you need to set up, and you might need some reminders. I usually take a blanket under my shins all the way past my toenails so that I don't feel irritated by the contact with the floor directly. Usually needing some support under the sitting bones for most of us. It could be a block, it could be blanket, but I do like to take the broad side of the block to cover the sitting bones, and it fits right between my feet. And then I do take some time to move the flesh of the legs, rolling the calf muscles out and under thighs in. And you'll know when you have the alignment, you'll see your kneecaps, which if you think about the knees having four corners, they're all looking straight ahead. There's not an internal rotation of the inner upper knees, inner lower knees. Also notice your feet pointing straight back. And just bring your hands to the soles of your feet, maybe the ball mounds, pressing down firmly and adjusting the shoulders back. One thing we're going to kind of, even though it's not about the legs, we're going to think about the pelvis today. When we work with back bends, sometimes when we open the chest, we hyperextend the lumbar. So as you feel your chest lift and spread here, try to flatten the lumbar spine by moving the tailbone into the front body and keep your shoulders in line with your hips. And again, there might be some resistance here in the legs. This is a deep stretch. And I just want to point out, I know some of us have issues in the knee, some of us who are here. So you could sandwich a blanket between your calf muscles and your thighs right up to the backs of the knees. That can be helpful. I know my sister has a meniscus issue. You can also put a lot more support under your buttocks if you need to support your knees that way. So breathing into the stretch occurring in the quadriceps, in the shins, the tops of the feet, the ankles. And just leaving the legs now as they are, raising the arms. And without the sitting bones becoming any lighter, extend up through your fingertips, but anchor the shoulders into the trunk. The shoulders are always kind of needing to be reminded where they go because they kind of sit in the middle of the body. Plug the shoulders into the trunk and then contrast that with a little extension through your fingernails. And then grab hold of your opposite elbows and take the elbow tips just slightly farther back. And again, as the chest opens, watch the lumbar. If it becomes indented or hyperextended, just flatten it out. And then coming to the top of an in-breath, we're going to dip the left elbow low, the right elbow high, and we're just going to bring some lateral movement into the spine here. So you'll notice you just shifted your weight to the left. So be intentional about setting some weight back into your right shin, your right sitting bone, and again, the right shoulder is part of the grounded body. And a couple deep breaths, opening the side body, the intercostals, deepening into this crescent moon shape with your spine. On an in-breath, you'll lengthen back up to level forearms and just extend the arms just so that you can change out the crossing of the arms, go to the opposite crossing of the arms. And then take the elbow tips back, shoulder blades move in there. And on an exhale, taking right elbow a little lower and left elbow high. And then trying to rebalance the weight of the foundation of the pose, the sitting bones, the shins, the left shoulder. And just a reminder here, when we work with back bends and energy that is kind of exciting and upward moving, to not let the eyes roll up in your head, to not let the temples harden. So we want to keep ourselves as quiet as we can. The poses themselves naturally upregulate us, so just keeping a sense of quietness in the face, the temples, the eyes. Inhale back to center and re-extend the arms straight up and release the arms down. Good. So we'll twist before we finish. You might need an additional block behind you so you can set the hand there. We don't want to have to lean back like a kickstand. We don't want to do that. We want the spine to stay upright when we twist. So you might need just something higher to put right behind your buttocks. So you can place your hand. We're going to raise the arms on an in-breath. And on an exhale, you're going to bring your right hand to your left thigh and your left hand behind you, maybe on that support. And just gently turning, sensing the spine kind of in the center of your being. And the spine is kind of a paradox because it's equally mobile and stable. So just think about that spine turning here. Oh, it supports us, but it's also very flexible. And then you're just going to bring your chin from one shoulder to the other. So a little bit of neck mobility here, just slowly, like you're tracking the room, like a panorama with your eyes from one shoulder to the other, just bringing a little mobility into the neck. When you go to the one shoulder, it can deepen the twist because you're in a full twist. But when you go to the other shoulder, make sure you're not coming out of the twist. So still working that first twist. And the next time your chin is right above your sternum, just leave your head there. Raise the arms on the in-breath, come back to center, and we'll move to the other side, taking the left hand to the right thigh and the right hand behind us. Just keeping the neck and head still for now as you just begin to initiate the twist to the right side. And do your best not to lean back on the hand behind you. Use it, if anything, use it to keep your weight forward and your spine upright. And then you can start tracking that chin from one shoulder to the other. Sensing the mobility of the neck. Sensing the opportunity for each side of that rotation. One brings you deeper into the twist. One really challenges you to keep your attention on the twist. Just a couple more here. And the next time you're kind of lined up with the breastbone, with the chin, you can stay there, keep the head still, raise the arms, come back to center, and exhale, release the arms. So we always want to do something to extend our legs after hero pose. So what we're going to do is some work with Corvo Tanasana, which is a back bend. But we start from Dandasana, which is our seated upright position. Danda is the Sanskrit word for the spine. And so the legs firmly planted on the floor are really the foundation of giving the spine this upright feeling. So you're just going to sit on the floor, your hands right next to your hips, and just find Dandasana. And the work here after hero pose is to really spread the backs of the knees. So a couple ways we can do that is just reach more emphatically out through the heels, out through the ball rounds, out through the toe pads. We can also bifurcate the muscle, just running our hands down the backs of the legs. For some of us that have more fleshy legs, that can be really helpful to help the backs of the knees sit down. And then just intentionally pressing your legs into the floor. So the legs being active is what gives the spine a boost. And that's kind of the takeaway for our class today. In general, is the legs are really going to give our spine a boost in our back bends. So plant those legs, just a couple more breaths. Okay, so we're going to work Corvo Tanasana kind of incrementally in baby steps. So we're going to come onto our forearms. So the forearms are in general kind of right in line with the shoulders. And what you're going to notice here is when you lift your chest toward the ceiling, for most of us, we get really short in the lumbar spine. So we have to simultaneously lengthen or flatten the lumbar spine without collapsing the chest. So it's very awkward, actually, to try to coordinate those things. So I just want you to kind of press into your arms, press into your legs, move the tailbone toward the ceiling to help you flatten the lumbar. But don't let your chest sink. We have gravity, we're facing gravity with the chest. So don't let your chest sink, but somehow lengthen your lumbar spine back out. We don't want to be this, I call it the pooching belly, sway back monster. We don't want to be that. We want to move the tailbone toward the ceiling like the letter J. Long lumbar spine, keep the chest lifted. And now go ahead and bring yourself back to Dandasana just for a moment. So that's a lot of work for the neck to hold your head up there, which isn't really my, I don't want you to get tired or strain your neck. So from that, hopefully you gained a little bit of body intelligence. We're going to move into the modified Corvo Tanasana. So we're going to bend the knees. We do this on the hands, but if you have wrist issues, you can always come back to your forearms. That's a perfectly fine modification. So your hands are going to begin kind of roughly, slightly behind the shoulder line, because when you press up, your arms will then align shoulders above wrists. So it's just a slightly farther back than the shoulder line. Your fingertips point toward you. And on an exhale, you're going to press your feet into the floor, lift your hips, and again, find that action of moving your chest toward the ceiling, but without collapsing the lumbar. Take the tailbone up to the ceiling, and then come back to your butt. And you can slide your heels closer, loop your arms around your shins, sit up tall, take a couple breaths. So one piece of back bending that we can tap into to amplify the poses, and it's shown in this pose, is stepping more intentionally into your feet. So we're going to do that version again. I want you to just really step into your feet more deeply, and you might feel that it gives your spine a boost. So let's set it up again. Your feet are aligning, your heels in line with your sitting bones, so hip distance wide roughly. Your hands slightly farther back than your shoulders. And you're going to press into your feet, come up on an exhale. Move the tailbone toward the ceiling, but keep your chest lifted and plant those feet, especially your big toes, especially your inner heels, because we do tend to turn out in the feet. Good. So that's a lot of work. You can sit down. And now just wrap your arms around your shins, sit up nice and tall. Take a couple breaths. So for a lot of us, that's kind of where we need to work. But for some of us, we might be encouraged to move into the full pose, which is extending our legs and pressing up that way. So the pose is the inversion of plank pose. It's just flipped over. So the idea is to eventually get your feet on the floor, but you don't have to start there. So don't worry about the feet being kind of stuck to the floor. You can reach toward the floor and have the same effect. If you're going to do the modified version again, you're going to keep your knees bent. And then the same position for your hands. And if you need to come onto forearms, you can. Big in breath here. On your exhale, lift the hips, move the tailbone toward the ceiling. Try to drive your inner thighs down and really press into your heels, especially the inner heels. Lengthen the lumbar spine. Keep your chest lifted. Go ahead and sit down. Bring the heels in. Give your legs a hug. Sit up and just take a couple deep breaths. Okay. So this last one, same thing. You get to make a choice if you're going to do modified or try for that full version again. Hold it as many breaths as you can, and you're going to self-direct when you come out of it. So preparing, take an inhale here. Exhale, lift your hips. Try to be one straight line from your feet to your shoulders. Move the shoulder blades toward the chest. Move the tailbone toward the ceiling and use your legs. Press the feet down into the floor. That will drive the tailbone up. Good. Go ahead and have a seat. Nice work. And once again, just recover for a few breaths. Beautiful. All right, so we haven't done a lot of fluid movement yet to really get the spine awake. So we're going to do child's pose, table pose, cobra pose. I'll show you what that looks like. There's a little adjustment you have to make with your knees. So we're kind of in a wide knee child's pose. And then we're going to, you can watch just for a second. We're going to move through table, and that's when you can bring the knees hip distance. And then we're going to take the pelvis toward the floor and come down for cobra pose. We're going to come into cobra pose. And then we're going to move back to child, and you need to separate the knees again. So the knees should be wide for child, and they should be hip distance for the rest of it. So that's just a little transition you're going to have to make. So let's all begin in child's pose. Knees wide, feet together. curl your tailbone like it's a periscope. Point that little eyeball toward the floor. Child's pose is called child's pose because we have one curve from the brainstem to the tailbone, just like we did in utero. We only have one curve along the spine. Inhale, you're going to come through table. So this is where we step the knees, hip distance, the feet also that wide. And then move your weight forward. You're going to try to lead with the pelvis coming down first. You're going to place the abdomen. And then you're ready to go for child's pose, or sorry, for Cobra Pose on an exhale, pressing up into Cobra Pose. And then keep pressing yourself up to bring yourself back to child. Okay, so the knees open up, we sit back. You can do this at your own speed. And when you're ready to transition, coming into table on an inhale, exhale the pelvis down. Inhale, resting the front body. Exhale, pressing up to Cobra. So in yoga, try to kind of do the harder part, the working part on the exhalation when you're moving fluidly with the breath. So just do a couple more. When you're pressing up to Cobra Pose, do so on an exhalation. Try to keep weight to the small toes, weight to the outer hips. Sinking back to child on an exhale. And we're actually going to meet up in the prone position. So the next time you are lying down on your abdomen, we can start from there. So it looks like everybody made their way. Good. So put your elbows underneath your shoulders. We're going to do a little work with Sphinx Pose here. And then take care of your legs. So press the tops of the feet individually into the floor and rotate the inner thighs up, the outer thighs down. So in essence, we want the front centers of the thighs meeting the floor. We want to have our kneecaps on the floor and all 10 toes on the floor. Elbows in line with shoulders. Nice spread to the forefingers. And then find a way to kind of scrub your elbows toward your hips to pull the shoulder blades toward the chest. And then take the pelvis and tilt it back. So you'll feel your pubic bone kind of moving more deeply into the floor. Think about the flesh of the buttocks moving toward the feet. And then press your legs more intentionally into the floor. And just see what that does to the feeling in your spine, especially the lower back. Pressing the thighs down, the tops of the feet, pressing the pelvis down, the hips, even the flesh of the buttocks, pressing that forward toward the mat, keeping some weight down on your small toes. So I like to practice this way because it takes the direct focus off my spine and it ensures that I'm moving with integrity. I'm not overdoing, I'm not hurting myself. I'm really letting the legs drive how deep I go. Again, watch the eyeballs. If your eyes are bugging out of your head, maybe just close them. Look toward your cheeks, soften the temples. You're just going to hold for a few more breaths here, working with these actions, imprinting the body with these actions. You should feel good contact or pressure with the pelvis against the floor. Think about the inner thighs lifting toward the ceiling. The flesh of the buttocks spreading. Good. Now go ahead and relax, release, make a little pillow out of your arms, bend your knees and sweep your legs back and forth. When I do this, I think about the toy we had when we were little, the Etch-a-Sketch. And we shake the board and it clears the board. So when I windshield wiper my legs, I kind of think about clearing any tension from my lower back this way. Okay, so we're just going to take that a step farther. And we're going to attempt to extend the arms from Sphinx Pose. So go ahead and reset your legs. Again, the feet are hip distance. Your small toes should be just as heavy as your big toes. Press each foot individually, lift the inner thighs up, roll the outer thighs down. Place your elbows in line with your shoulders, palms are down. And just come back to a good strong Sphinx pose. And then scrub your hands against your mat. Hopefully you have a sticky mat. And you're gonna try to extend your arms. And then you're gonna wind the inner elbows to face the ceiling, which helps you roll the inner upper arms out. And then you're going to lift your inner thighs up and press your small toes down and really press the thighs into the floor. Try to lift your inner knees toward the ceiling as well. Remember, knees like to rotate. We don't want them to. So roll your outer knees down, inner knees up. And find a way to keep your chest forward without pinching off your lumbar spine. So flatten or lengthen the lumbar. Press the buttocks from back to front. There's only a back buttocks anyway. Press the buttocks toward the front body. Couple more breaths. Don't let your butt turn into a nugget. Soften the buttocks flesh. Spread it. Lift those inner thighs. Good. And release. Making a little pillow out of your arms again. Sweeping the legs back and forth. Clearing the etch-a-sketch. Okay, so we're going to come into an inverted version of hero pose. We get to stay where we are. This is Bakasana. This is the translation is frog pose, although I talked about in other traditions of yoga, frog pose might be something else. In Iyengar yoga, this is the frog pose, Bakasana. So think about your hero pose. Your knees are together. So bring your knees together. And remember, in hero pose, your heels are outside your hips. So just take a moment to, with your knees together, bend your knees and try to bring your heels kind of toward the outer hip line. This is the shape of the pose. Today, we're only going to do one leg at a time. The full pose is both legs. It's quite intense. And we're going to play with asymmetrical arms. So you're going to, because we're going to take hold of the right leg to begin with, you're going to cross your left forearm in front of your chest so that your left elbow is right under your shoulder. And then we're going to bend the right knee and take hold of the foot somehow. So the work here, I want to point this out, is to clamp the knees, which as a result in yoga, we always have equal and opposite action going on. When the knees are tightened together and narrow, it results in a broadness to the hips and the pelvis and the sacrum. So it should feel really good in your back when the knees are close together. And in back bends, we have to constantly train the knees in because they want to go wide. So this is a great way to train your knees in. So you're going to notice you're probably not very intentional with what's going on in your upper body. So let's bring a little more intention to centering your weight across the hip line. You might feel heavier on your left. Try to establish evenness across the hip line. Same with the shoulders. You have right shoulder probably rotating back. So do your best to align your shoulders and square your shoulders. And with the next 5 breaths, just simply guide the heel as best you can toward the outer right hip. And breathe. And to help keep your lumbar long, press your left leg into the floor. Okay, softly release. Do your windshield wiper legs, clearing the lower back. And then go ahead and extend your legs, make sure the knees come back together. This time the right forearm will be kind of right in front of the chest, the right elbow is right under the shoulder line. And then you're going to start to reach back with the left hand, find the foot. You might need a strap to do that, to hold your foot. And then do your best to align the shoulders more level, to bring weight back over to the left hip side, to use the anchor of your right leg to help keep the pelvis tilting in a posterior way to move the tailbone into the floor. Don't let your eyes bug out of your head. And yawning open the left hip flexor just a little bit more with the next 2 breaths. Let's just stay 2 more breaths. Wonderful. Go ahead and release. And again, just releasing with a few sweeping from side to side movements with your legs. Okay, so flexibility, stability, and alignment with the legs is really kind of what we're thinking about today with back bends. And one piece of back bends that kind of gets overlooked are our hip flexors. If they're tight, our spine will show up as tight as well. And for most of us, our hip flexors are very tight because the hip flexors are named as such because they flex more than they extend. So we're going to extend the hip flexors right now. And we're going to use a block. So you're going to kind of take on a lunging position. And I'm hoping that, I think most of you do, but you have a foam block. If you have a bamboo block, it won't feel very good on your body. But I think most of you have the foam blocks. So you're going to start in this general shape. Your right knee is in line with your right hip. Your left foot heel is in line with your left knee. And then we're going to angle the block toward the right thigh so that when we shift forward, the block is holding us up. Okay, so I've kind of angled my block on the floor, it's on the edge, and I'm wedging the other edge against my thigh so that I can work with the hip flexor yawning open without having to contract to hold myself here. So I want all extension, I don't want any contraction. In this, because of our intents and purposes, it's okay if left knee is beyond the ankle. Don't worry about that. And then your work really is to, oh, by the way, if you're having a kneecap issue with right knee, put a blanket under the knee. We don't want to be dragging on the kneecap. So don't be suffering because you don't like what your knee feels like. Go ahead and put a blanket under your knee. Just make sure it's not super bulky. We don't want to distort the pose very much, but we do want comfort. Okay, so the work once you are here is to get your torso to stand up again. One way we cheat is we tilt our torso forward and then we lose the hip flexor extension. So do your best to tip the pelvis back. Like it's a bowl, you're tipping it to drink. That's the tilt that we want. And then you're gonna see if you can take your hands behind your back, interlock your hands. And then put something imaginary heavy in your palms to extend your arms. Keep your eyes forward, but don't lose track of the eyes having roots to the back of the skulls. Keep your eyes anchored into the back of the head. And give a few breaths to your right hip flexor. So when the hip flexor is tight, it puts us in a forward pelvic tilt. And as we know, for back bends, we need a backward pelvic tilt. We need a posterior tilt. So this will help us to do that. This will help our back bends. Go ahead and help yourself out. Use an in-breath to come up and out of it. We're just going to transition to kneeling on the other knee. Don't go too far with this. Sometimes people overdo, and then we get other issues as a result. So just meet your edge. And this is, how do we know it's our edge? Because we're not overwhelmed. How do we know we're overwhelmed? Our mind starts to wander. So one sign that you're in your perfect edge is you're with every breath. You're with the current sensation. You're with good action in your body. You're present. Okay, so you're going to angle the block toward the left thigh. And then if you can take your hands behind your back, if you can't, you can put them on your hips and just clamp the elbows. Otherwise, interlock the hands, extend the arms. Try to keep your torso upright. We have the advantage of having a camera so we can see if we're truly upright. Keep your skull over your spine. Don't throw the head forward and don't let the eyes bulge out of the sockets. Just give a few deep breaths. Consider thinking about imagining the left hip flexor elongating. And it can only do that if it feels supported. If it doesn't feel supported, it's still going to be tensing and contracting, even though we think we're stretching. So that's why we have this block kind of propping us up here. Keep plunging the tailbone toward the soft tissue of the body. Don't let your tail fly back. Remember, the periscope is trying to see what you're looking at. And on an inhale, lifting through the top of the head. Oops. You're just going to come out of it. Good. All right. Now we're going to work a little bit with more of the emphasis on the power of the legs, the stability piece. And we're going to use the set of Chaturanga, Cobra, and upward facing dog. So your two blocks are going to be your best friends for this. Hopefully you have two. If you don't have two, you're going to try to use a blanket to create the height of the other block. Okay, so we're going to set up two blocks for the chest and the pelvis. And if you have only a blanket to work with, I recommend that the blanket is for the pelvis, because I think you'll want the chest having the support of the block. They're going to go low and they're going to be horizontal. And then you can put yourself on those blocks with your chest on that first one and your pelvis on that second one. And we'll just kind of start in our Chaturanga position. So this is the four-limb staff pose. It's actually Chaturanga Dandasana, which again, we're talking about how the limbs support the spine, the danda. So activate your legs. Toes are tucked under. Your legs are fully extended. And even though you're facing gravity in the opposite direction, you want to press your thighs from the front thighs to the back. So you have to really resist your thighs from front to back. And with the power of the legs, can you help the tailbone move in to flatten the lumbar so you don't have your butt 2 feet above the block? So you want to feel anchoring into the pelvis. Use your legs. Put your hands in position so that your forearms show up perpendicular to the floor. So upright forearms. So when we narrow something, something broadens. Narrow the elbows, squeeze the elbows to the sides, which broadens your shoulders. And right now you have the blocks supporting you, so you're in Chaturanga Dandasana. When we don't use the blocks, you're doing this with your own efforts. So this is really training us wise actions without that ticking time bomb of holding ourselves up. So usually come crashing down pretty quickly in this pose. Look forward, and without the hands actually moving, scrub them toward the feet to move the shoulder blades in, and keep activating your legs. Keep resisting your thighs, front thighs to back thighs, and move the tailbone toward the block. Okay, so this is exhausting. Knees down, press yourself back to child's pose, and rest your forehead on that block you are using for your hips. So now we're going to transition. We're going to see if we can move from Chaturanga Dandasana to Cobra. So what that means is we're going to keep the pelvis on that block, but we're going to be raising the chest. And here's where you're going to have to keep track of your lumbar not getting short. Okay, so come back to your two blocks. Go back to your Chaturanga position. Your legs are on fire. They're active. You're shooting laser beams out of your heels. Your hands are right where they go so that your forearms are upright. Squeeze the elbows in, broaden the shoulders. Look forward. And now exhale, keep the pelvis where it is and extend your arms. Shoot the breastbone forward, but keep track of the lumbar not turning into a cramped, pinched off thing. So lengthen the lumbar, move the tailbone even farther toward the front body. Wind the inner upper arms out. Good, and come back. Once the knees are down, shift back to child's pose again. Take a breather.
So Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, upward facing dog, is simply graduating from Cobra to keeping your hips anchored, but we're not gonna any longer have the contact of the block. So the hips will come off the block, but I don't want you to let the butt fly to the ceiling. You're still gonna be pressing the hips toward the floor, but moving them off the block. So it's a little bit more challenging. So we're gonna come back to Chaturanga Dandasana. Get your legs fired up, ready to go. Get your arms ready to go. Try to smooth out the lumbar spine. Good, you guys look awesome. On an exhale, come into Cobra Pose, lifting the chest away from block number 1, and then exhale again and see if you can float the hips, but you're still pressing them to the floor. Good work. Back to the hips down, place the knees, and take yourself to child's pose. Awesome work. Couple breaths here. Okay. So just for fun, and I know some of you get triggered when I say that, we're going to try it without the blocks. It is fun unless you put expectations on yourself, then it isn't fun. So remind yourself before we go into it, all practice is good practice, and whatever happens, we're not invested, we're interested. Okay, so we're gonna be on our front bodies. Our hands are gonna be right next to the lowest floating ribs. We're gonna squeeze the elbows in to broaden the shoulders. We're gonna attempt to come into Cobra Pose on an exhale. Come into Cobra Pose, and then continue up to Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, which is upward facing dog. The hips come off the floor. Maybe they don't. Don't let your inner thighs roll down, lift them up, and don't let your big toes crash into the floor. Keep your small toes down. Good. And then bring yourself back to the floor. Do the little etch-a-sketch with your feet. And then just so we get a little taste of Chaturanga without blocks, we will move into it from a full straight arm plank down to the 90-degree elbow, Chaturanga Dandasana. So if you think that's going to be too much, you will try from a knee down full arm plank to a bent elbow. Okay, so we're all going to start from table pose. And then extend your legs back if you're going for the full plank position, and create a line from your shoulders to your heels. So some of us are floaters where the butt floats high like we're in a mini dog, and some of us are saggers. What you want to do is have your hips right in the middle, hips between shoulders and heels. Look forward on an exhale, start to bend the elbows, but keep that plank line. And then come all the way down. Good, and rest one last time here, sweeping the legs back and forth. Okay. So let's just sit up for a moment. We're going to touch upon bridge pose and the full wheel pose. Don't worry, we're just going to do the full wheel pose for like half a minute. But the idea of bringing the elbows closer and the knees closer so that we can keep the shoulders broad and the hips broad. That's a big piece of back bends. So I just want everybody to take their arms up and try to bring your fingertips onto your shoulders. So it's like your palms are facing the ceiling. So we all get that sense that the elbows want to broaden, which of course narrows the shoulders. So the work is really to squeeze the elbows toward each other and to lift the elbows.
Okay, so I want to see everybody lifting the elbows toward the ceiling and keeping them close together. And again, watch the temples, watch the eyes, the energy. Good. So this is the position for Urdhva Dhanurasana, where you press yourself up with the arms and legs. And if you can train the elbows to clamp in, it's going to really help you. So similarly, we're going to do a bridge pose with the knees having to hold a block, because the knees staying close means we have lots of broadness in the lower back, which we want. So you're going to come into a bridge pose with a block between your knees. And it's the narrow aspect of the block. So hopefully, I know we might have different size blocks, but hopefully when you're holding the block with your knees show up only as wide as your hips. We don't want them any wider. Once you have that, walk your feet closer to your sitting bones. And make sure your second toes are running in alignment with your heels. We really need to watch that we don't turn out, because that shortens the pelvis and the hips and the sacrum as well. So you're going to squeeze that block, extend your arms so that your fingers come very close to your heels and your palms are down. And then press your hands into the floor to help you roll the outer upper arms down to broaden the shoulders and to help lift the shoulder blades toward the chest. Once that chest opens, you're going to feel the lumbar curve exaggerate, flatten the lumbar curve. This is all the year of flattening the curve, right? Keep your chin toward your chest. And on an exhale, raise your hips. And as you squeeze the block, try to roll your inner thighs down. Step more intentionally into your feet. Notice how that gives you a little boost to really step into your feet. Don't let your butt do the work. The butt is hypertonic. It's going to try to do everything. Don't let it. But keep stepping into your feet. That should put the buttocks off duty a little bit more. Roll the inner thighs down. Tailbone curling to look at the ceiling. Chest is lifting, but we're keeping lumbar long. And then walk the spine down. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Walk it down. When your sacrum and hips come down, restore the neutral lumbar curve. And then pick up your feet and either grab behind the thighs or over the shins. And hug your legs in a little closer. And now try to hold your outer knees with your hands. And just notice how good it feels when you contain the knees, when you narrow the knees. The lower back really benefits with a sense of spaciousness. Good. Now step the feet down. And I just want you to make one little attempt. It's actually not little, it's big. It's going to kind of put everything together that you learned today and that you've learned from yoga over the years. Urdhva Dhanurasana is considered a pinnacle pose, a full wheel pose. I used to have a teacher at my studio that would only teach her level 2 students if they could do this pose. So she used it as kind of the gold standard of if you were ready for other intense poses. So you're going to set up like you're setting up for bridge. Walk your feet in. Remember the knee distance of only hip wide, so as if you're holding a block, but you're not going to. Flatten the lumbar curve. And then you're going to try to do that same action we did with our hands. So take your fingertips right above your shoulders. Put your fingertips on the floor. And then clamp your elbows closer together. And on an exhale, see what you've got. Maybe you can come to the crown of the head. Maybe you can lift all the way up. Maybe you can't even get off the floor. Again, we're more interested in what happens than we're not invested in what happened. We're just curious. Good. And then if you got to the crown, you might go all the way up, or you might come back to the back of the head and come down. Beautiful. You get to try it one more time. So take a couple breaths rest. I have this hair clip in my hair that I forgot to remove, so I did not go farther than my crown because it hurt. So we're going to try it one more time, and maybe you just do a really good bridge because you learned something from that attempt. Maybe you're not ready.
to do it again. Maybe you're gonna try it again and try something different. So you do you. As you're ready, make sure your legs are on board. Your fingertips are gonna be right above the shoulders. You're clamping your elbows in. You're gonna be intentional with your legs. Come up on an exhale to the crown, and then maybe all the way up. Use your arms, use your legs. Oh, okay. And then back to the back of the head and all the way down. So just something to note, when we come up into this pose, we come to the crown and then we come off the head. When we come out of the pose, you do not need to come back to the crown of the head. Just come all the way directly onto the back of the head. Okay, so we're going to finish before Shavasana with a twist. So I did plan for one strap pose today. I couldn't remember, but I did plan for a Parivrita Padangustasana, which I want us to use the strap because it'll make it more passive. So it's important to always finish a back bending practice with some twists because it helps us settle for Shavasana and it helps us cleanse the palate. We upregulate the nervous system with back bends. And we can keep some of that energy, but we want to kind of also soothe the nervous system. We don't want to leave kind of in an idling high mind state. So we're going to take a loop that's passable. It just needs to fit over your right foot. Doesn't need to be tight. So you're just going to feed the tail through the rings. And then you're going to hold it with your left hand. And you're going to gently guide your right leg to the floor on the left. You can prop the leg if the floor feels too far down. You could put something under your foot or your leg. It doesn't really matter where you put it. But you just took your right leg across your body to the left and your hips should be stacked. Your right hip is on top of your left hip. You're going to start with your right hand on your side ribs. Do your best to bring some weight back to your right shoulder. It won't be obviously perfect, but try to bring the right shoulder, release it back to the floor. And start with your eyes looking straight toward the ceiling. And then from here, you might unfold the right arm out to the right, and you might roll your head to the right. So one day, someday, you're holding your foot directly. So be as close to your foot as you can be. One day, someday, your foot is on the same line as your left shoulder. So encourage your leg toward the shoulder line, even though it's going to try to slip away. And then another thing that happens is we get a little bit dull to the inner right leg. So try to reach out through the inner right foot. Don't let your foot sickle. So have the inner right foot against the floor, reach it out. And we'll stay here another half a minute. Maybe you close your eyes. Now to come out of it, just let your top leg knee bend and help yourself back to your back. And take the strap off the foot and take some time on your back, just rearranging your body so that you are in alignment. We don't want to start side two kind of in a twisted way. So lengthen the hips, lengthen the shoulders, lengthen the skull. Make sure your spine is in alignment. You're not in a kind of a S curve or anything. And then take your loop over to your left foot. And you're just going to guide your leg to the right. You might prop it. You might keep the knee bent. You have to kind of always be discerning for what is needful in your body. The hips are attempting to be left above right here. You're going to drape your left hand over your side ribs. Encourage the shoulder to sit back down as much as you can. And then maybe unfold the arm, maybe let the head roll to look off to the left. And the more you can surrender the legs, the more the spine will release. For some of us, we really feel this in the outer hips. This is an area for most of us that's really glued up with the surface tissue is very tight. The fascia can get very tight in our outer hips. And just 3 more breaths. See if you can really track those next 3 exhales to their very finish. And using an in-breath and starting to bend the top leg knee. Gently find your way back to center. And then we're just going to massage the lower back once before we come into Shavasana. So picking up your feet off the floor, keep your knees bent, and just cup your kneecaps with your hands. And you're going to just steer the knees around in a circular pattern. And make sure to kind of vary the sizes of those circles so that you're really massaging that whole big bony plate of your sacrum against the floor. And then find a place to land and switch direction. And again, just exploring space with smaller and bigger circles. Maybe noticing areas that are particularly enjoyable. And then bring the knees back to center and hug the legs in, reclining child's pose. So you also want to make sure to tilt your chin toward your chest. It's also important we do something in opposition to all those back bends. So just a little bit of a forward bend here, reclining child's pose. The singular curve from the brainstem to the tailbone. And of course, when we have the thighs against the abdomen and the chest, it's an automatic kind of bypass into the parasympathetic nervous system, into our rest and digest mode. And now begin to come into Shavasana. Make sure to address anything else that needs to shift or move or be supported. If you need to sit up to do that, make sure to roll to your side first. And we'll have a 2-minute Shavasana. You're always welcome to stay longer. You don't have to come up with the group if you want to extend your Shavasana. You can. Take some time with the alignment of the pose. This is a pose after all. Putting your body as spaciously and symmetrically in that reclining position as you can. And then the work is really to turn all of the powered up parts of the body, to turn them off. Sometimes I imagine going through my entire body, like a little version of me inside my body, shutting off all the lights from my head all the way to my feet. Shavasana is about letting go.
So the two pillars of yoga are practice and renunciation. We just got through the practice. And now we're in the renunciation, letting go. And very appropriately, fall is also about letting go. So I'm going to offer this poem by Mary Oliver called Song for Autumn. In the deep fall, don't you imagine the leaves think how comfortable it will be to touch the earth instead of the nothingness of air and the endless freshets of wind? And don't you think the trees themselves, especially those with mossy warm caves, begin to think of the birds that will come, 6 a dozen, to sleep inside their bodies? And don't you hear the goldenrod whispering goodbye? The everlasting being crowned with the first tuffets of snow. The pond vanishes, and the white field over which the fox runs so quickly brings out its blue shadows. And the wind pumps its bellows. And at evening especially, the piled firewood shifts a little, longing to be on its way. Just give yourself over to the next 5 or 6 breaths. Riding those waves of breath with your own attention, your precious attention. Drawing a breath from the feet. See if you can draw the breath all the way up to the crown of your head. And gently, slowly release the entire breath all the way back down your body, back out through the feet. And picking back up with the easy cycles of your breath. The spontaneous, automatic breath, unconditioned breath. Start to bring gentle movement in through the extremities, the fingers, the toes, maybe rocking the head. Eventually bending your knees and elbows. Bringing your hands onto your chest or your belly. And gently shifting over to one side. Moving from the corpse pose to the fetal position. And then pressing your hands firmly into the floor. Bring yourself to seated. And once you're seated, bring the hands together. Use the base of the thumbs to press up on the sternum, to lift the flesh of the chest up, and let that flesh roll down the back. Let the corners of the mouth. Keep your gaze pointed down. Let's take a breath in and let it go. From the place within me that I know to be divine, I honor that place within each of you. Namaste. All right, beautiful work today. I will see you guys soon. Megan, I'm so glad you joined. Anne's here.
Hello, my sisters. I love you so much. I'm with you this weekend.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. I'll see you
When
next
your
week.
last name is Marca Calvo. Okay, bye.
It will be tomorrow. Bye, you guys.
Bye,